Mr. Garrettson, seconded by Ms. Romanato, moves that Bill C-243, an act respecting the development of a national maternity assistance program strategy and amending the Employment Insurance Act maternity benefits, be now read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Debate, the Honourable Member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to speak to my private member's bill, an act respecting the development of a national maternity assistance program strategy and amending the Employment Insurance Act. I would also like to thank the 12 honourable members of this House who have supported this legislation by officially seconding Bill C-243. Finally, thank you to the people of Kingston and the Islands for placing their confidence in me to be their voice in this House. And in particular, I want to recognize the individual whose story inspired me to pursue this legislation, Melody Ballard. Mr. Speaker, I am proud and deeply humbled to begin my remarks today by sharing Melody's compelling story with you. Melody is a welder in my community. In 2014, she became pregnant, and like many expecting mothers, she consulted with her medical practitioner to ensure that she was taking all the necessary steps to have a healthy pregnancy. Upon describing the hazardous nature of her work environment, Melody was told that she could no longer continue welding during her pregnancy as the function of her job would be unsafe and pose a significant risk to her future child. She reached out to her employer, which is a well-established and highly reputable shipbuilding firm in Kingston, but unfortunately, they were unable to provide reassignment or modify her duties in a way that would mitigate the risk. Forced to stop working, Melody applied for and was granted EI sickness benefits. Now, there are a couple of problems with this, Mr. Speaker. The first being that Melody was pregnant, not sick. The second problem is that these 15 weeks of benefits ran out long before Melody was eligible to officially begin her maternity leave. For 2.5 months, Melody waited to receive the maternity benefits she was entitled to. This income gap led to serious financial hardship and ultimately resulted in the loss of her home and significant personal distress. Frustrated with the shortcomings of the system, Melody did her own research, expecting to find that some program would be of help to her and any person in her circumstances. She discovered that outside of the province of Quebec, which has a program known as the Preventative Withdrawal Program, there was virtually no form of financial assistance that would compensate in situations such as these. What frustrates me most about Melody's story was that she did everything right, but the current system was simply not prepared to handle her situation. She took every reasonable action that you would expect from someone with a legitimate concern for the health of herself and her future child. She consulted with a midwife for medical advice. She reached out to her employer. She spoke with Service Canada on countless occasions. She did her own research, and she wrote to anybody she could think of. Melody did everything right, but our EI system failed her when she needed it. When Melody approached my office in early 2016, we researched the issue and found that the primary source of the problem was a rule under Section 22 of the EI Act, which requires that women, regardless of her circumstances, must wait until 8 weeks before her expected due date before she can start receiving maternity benefits. For women like Melody, who are employed in occupations where it is unsafe to work at early stages of pregnancy, this restriction can lead to long periods with absolutely no income. Melody's story is why I'm putting forward this legislation today. The core purpose and effect of Bill C-243 is to remove barriers to women's full and equal participation in all sectors of the workforce, including jobs which are potentially hazardous. Bill C-243 does this in two parts. In the short term, my bill seeks to improve the flexibility of EI benefits to better reflect the changing labor market of today. In particular, my bill proposes an amendment to the Employment Insurance Act which would allow women like Melody who work in dangerous jobs to begin their 15 weeks of EI maternity benefits as early as 15 weeks prior to their due date. This is 7 weeks earlier than the current rules permit. Allowing women to start collecting EI up to 7 weeks early would provide a more timely financial assistance and greater flexibility to expecting mothers who are unable to work at early stages of pregnancy. This enhanced flexibility would simply mean that women could access the benefits they are entitled to sooner if the nature of their job prevents them from continuing to do their work during their pregnancy. For many women, for many of the women working in the skilled trades, construction, and other potential hazardous fields, the option for an earlier start to maternity leave would empower them to choose the maternity leave that is best for themselves and their family. The bill also outlines 2 basic conditions that must be met in order to be eligible for this exemption. First, the woman must provide a medical certificate attesting that she cannot perform her current duties because it may pose a risk to her health or that of her unborn child. Second, the employer must be unable to provide accommodations or reassignment that would mitigate this risk. I have heard from many members of the skilled trades and construction community, and the consensus is that the government policies and programs ought to keep pace with the changes in the skilled trades community, and in particular, the growing interest among women to become part of it. For example, the organization Women in Work Boots has said that these changes to how women can access leave while pregnant could lead to greater safety and security and a stress-free pregnancy and leave. The Canadian Apprenticeship Forum endorsed Bill C-243 because they think it reflects Canadian values when it comes to supporting women who wish to make their careers and support their families working in the skilled trades. And the Office to Advance Women Apprentices views this as being another stepping stone for the advancement of women in trade careers. It's important to note that the scope of Bill C-243 extends beyond skilled trades and construction, and I am proud that my bill has also been endorsed by Women in Science and Engineering, the Atlantic region, Mount St. Vincent University, the Canadian Coalition of Women in Engineering, Science, Trades and Technology, the Professional Engineers and Geoscientists Association of British Columbia, Engineers Nova Scotia, and Engineers Canada, who stated that Bill C-243 will be invaluable for engineers who are women, for their families, and for their employers. But these changes are just a first step, and only a partial solution to what I see as a much larger overall problem. Recognizing this, the second part of my bill calls on the Minister of Employment to develop a comprehensive strategy to ensure that pregnancy is not a barrier to a woman's full and equal participation in all aspects of the labour force. This part requires that the Minister of Employment and Social Development, in collaboration with other federal ministers, representatives of the provincial and territorial governments, and other relevant stakeholders, to conduct consultations on the prospect of developing a national maternity assistance program to support women who are unable to work due to pregnancy. My bill also includes accountability and transparency measures to ensure that the results of the consultation are accessible and presented in a timely manner. I would add that we do not have to look far to get a sense of what a national maternity assistance program might look like. Since 1981, the province of Quebec has offered the option of preventative withdrawal as part of the Safe Maternity Assistance Program. Under this program, your employer may opt to eliminate the hazard represented by your work or assign you to other tasks. If neither of these alternatives are doable, you are entitled to benefit from the preventative withdrawal and receive a compensation in the amount of 90% of your average pay. Furthermore, many advanced industrial countries have recognized the importance of maternal care and taken action to ensure that women in all professions receive adequate support throughout pregnancy and childcare. In Finland, for example, there is a class, special maternity benefits, which are provided when conditions may cause a particular risk to a woman's pregnancy and the hazard cannot be eliminated by the employer. In Australia, if there is no appropriate safe job available, an employee is entitled to take paid no safe job leave from their risk period, Similar programs that protect expecting mothers exist in France, Hungary, Denmark, and elsewhere. The underlying principle of my bill is that gender equality, which demands that both women and men have an equal opportunity to participate and become fully integrated into all sectors of the labor force. I am proud that my bill is supported by several women's advocacy organizations, each of which has done a great deal to advance equality and empower women through progressive public policies. These include the National Council of Women, the Canadian Federation of University Women, and the Canadian Women's Foundation, which called Bill C-243 a positive step to improve gender equality in Canada. My bill is resonating with stakeholder groups and ordinary Canadians across the country as they recognize that the principle gender equality must also extend to women entering so-called non-traditional occupations. Many of the discussions about equality have focused on including more women as doctors, lawyers, business leaders, and politicians. While well-intentioned, I think these conversations often neglect the fact that many women, like Melody, want to be construction workers, electricians, mechanics, masons, carpenters, machinists, boilermakers, pipe layers, heavy equipment operators, or even welders. The data on this is clear that while overall labor participation amongst women has increased from 37% in 1976 to 47% in 2014, women remain drastically underrepresented within many traditional male occupations. For example, in 2012, women represented only 4% of those working in construction. While some incredible work is being undertaken by the private and not-for-profit sector to encourage more women to enter the trades, I believe government also must do its part to create a positive environment to encourage more women to enter the workforce in these traditionally male-dominated occupations. The evidence is clear that improving the representation of women can support an organization's overall competitiveness and ability to thrive in a global market. Gender balance and diversity will make Canada's economy stronger and more competitive. But we have a long way to go before achieving this goal. Mr. Speaker, to conclude, as previously stated, I believe the current system provides a disincentive for women to enter certain types of work, forcing them to choose between having a family and pursuing their dream job. No woman should have to choose between being a mother and a welder, a mother and a construction worker, a mother and an engineer, or a mother in any profession for that matter. These are the objects of the bill which I am asking all members of this House to support at second reading. I am asking for their support to make a small but significant change that will improve the flexibility of EI maternity benefits and to call on the Minister to show federal leadership by developing a long-term and comprehensive national maternity assistance strategy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member for Mount Royal.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank my honourable friend from Kingston for his excellent speech and his inspired bill. I think that all of us on this side are very interested in advancing the cause of women in the workplace, particularly in non-traditional professions. I was proud, Mr. Speaker, I know my honourable colleague was the mayor. I was the mayor. We hired our first woman public works director in my city while I was mayor. And I think that that is an example, as we were getting more and more women in professions that otherwise, originally, you know, when I was born, certainly they would never have even considered joining. So I'd like to ask the honourable member, given the example of all of the countries he cited around the world, does he believe that in Canada we should be joining the rest of the world in terms of allowing women to not have to make a choice between motherhood and their profession? What does he think about that?
The honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for that question. Absolutely. I mean, this is the problem that we're facing right now is that the current system that we have is actually providing a disincentive. If a woman who is passionate about being a welder or a plumber or some form of work, but also thinks that she wants to become pregnant and have a family one day, is being forced to choose between either having that family or that profession in many cases, or they run into the situation that Melody did. So I think that, yes, we're behind the ball on this, so to speak. There are other countries that are leading the way. Even our neighboring province, as we sit here in Ontario, Quebec is leading the way on this. So I think that there's a lot we can do, and I'm really hopeful that the entire House will support this bill so that we can start to move in the right direction.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Churchill, Kiwatanuk-Aski.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for the work he's done on this front. Obviously, this is a major issue for many women, men, obviously as well, who are very concerned about the situation that many women face in the workplace. I do, and I'll obviously be speaking to this bill, but I do want to ask the member if he's aware of the concerns put forward by QP Quebec and others as well that have made it clear that this bill does not actually tackle the same sort of proposed changes as what exists in Quebec, and particularly the program that is known as Pour une maternité sans danger, and obviously the fact that that as a result of their concerns that they're very concerned about this bill, and I'm wondering if you could speak to that discrepancy.
Member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I thank my colleague for her question. And as she is well aware, one of the challenging parts about putting forward a private member's bill is your inability to introduce new spending. I would have loved to done and shaped this bill in such a way as to try to make it a lot more like the model that currently exists in Quebec. However, because of that limitation, I was unable to do so. That's why my bill and the EI part of it is just the first step to this. The second step is the bigger national dialogue about getting together with all stakeholders and having a discussion about this. That's where I'm really trying to drive this with the second part of the bill, and that's what the strategy is about.
Questions and comments? We have time for one more short question and response. Question et commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I, too, like my other colleague, would like to commend the member for what has been a very bold initiative, and maybe just leave it open-ended question if there's anything further he would like to add in terms of just the importance of making changes of this nature that are very progressive in their thinking.
Member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'll try to keep my last remark as brief as the question. All that I want to add by this at the end is that we have to remember that there are women out there who are seeking to get into these lines of work and these non-traditional jobs. They're already going out on the edge, or they're already taking a step forward by trying to get into these professions. They're already facing obstacles by doing that alone. We need to provide, as a government, an incentive to make that easier for them so that they don't have to feel and be discouraged by getting into jobs that they would traditionally not be seen as being in. Thank you.
Resuming debate. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, I'd like to say that this is an important private member's bill. We think it's a bit of a backdoor bill. It was presented by a duly elected member, and it came in through the front door. It's nice to see legislation come in through the front door. Even though it's private members' bill, we think it's fully valid. This has its importance, Mr. Speaker, and I think I'll say this again. So this is a private member's bill. I'd like to point out that this was presented in a very positive way. This member was elected and he took over from his predecessor from Kingston, and he saw a situation of a constituent in his riding office. People think we just squabble all the time here on the Hill, but that's not true. What we do here on the Hill is just part of our work as members of Parliament. We also do a lot of work in our ridings, and that takes up a lot of time. When you meet with constituents, when you talk to them, and when you listen to them, that's when you really understand the full import of our work, and that's exactly what happened with the member for Kingston. He had a constituent in his office. She had a situation. He listened, and he brought this legislation in through the front door, not through the back door, and so much the better. What is this all about, Mr. Speaker? It's about maternity leave, but a leave that would enable a woman who has a trade that may cause problems for her during her pregnancy, so she may have to preventively or preemptively take leave from her workplace. So that's the reality today. I don't mean this in any kind of pejorative way. Years ago, it might have been hard to imagine a woman welder, but today, of course, we're totally aware that there are no trades that are sex exclusive. All trades are open to everyone. A woman can do anything, any trade. But that does lead to certain realities. When pregnant, when you're a welder, you have a very physically demanding job. You're exposed to chemical products. You may have to bend over and lift heavy things and so on. So this can all have consequences for a pregnancy. You don't have to be a doctor to know that. So obviously, this raises concerns. So that's why we agree with this bill. You also have to understand, Mr. Speaker, that my riding is in Quebec, and we have this type of maternity leave. This type of leave already exists and has for some years. So we agree in principle, but we have other concerns. So I just want to say from the outset that I support this in principle, but this can have significant financial repercussions. The amount that this costs is very hard to evaluate because it really depends on the circumstances. In Quebec, 20% of women who get this preventive or preemptive leave, they may be hairdressers, they may deal with certain chemical products, they may be nurses who come into contact with people who are sick or with medical or chemical products. It can also include teachers in the classroom with the chalkboard and certain products. And so we have to be aware that this can lead to situations where the costs become quite substantial. 1 in 5 pregnancies in Quebec leads to this type of leave being taken. So I know we've been talking about C-14 a lot lately, and it has a precedent in Quebec. So I'm often thinking about the Quebec model since we've led the way in both of these areas. But if you talk about the Canadian model, it's about the same as in Quebec. 1 in 5 people take leave. So that's 75,000 women in Canada would have access to that leave. That's not a bad thing, but you have to be aware of the reality. And that could cost almost $250 million. So that has to be taken into account. Either you believe it or you don't, but if you believe it, you have to budget for it. So this is a private member's bill that came in through the front door, but it can't have financial consequences. That's not allowed, and so you have to keep that in mind. So that's why, Mr. Speaker, we agree with the other part of the bill that would lead to the creation of a committee. I think it's a conversational committee, a committee that would consult Canadians to get to the bottom of this, to really scope out the dimensions of the issue, see what works and doesn't work so well in Quebec, take a good look at the Quebec approach, and draw lessons from that. So I would repeat that we fully agree in principle, but we're keenly aware of the financial consequences, and we think there should be a conversation, a national discussion of this matter. We believe in families. We believe in the benefits and the support that government can provide families. We're in favor of that. It can be positive and constructive. We're fully aware that in this day and age, no trade is just for men or just for women. Everything's open to everyone, and that's what has led to this improvement to existing legislation and regulations when it comes to maternity leave for all Canadian women. and hopefully millions of Canadians will be born in this great big country of ours. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Churchill, Kiwatanuk-Aski.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad to rise in this House today to speak on the bill put forward by the Member of Parliament from Kingston and the Islands. And I certainly want to begin by saying that we appreciate the preamble of the bill, which praises the Quebec program pour une maternité sans danger. We recognize that this program has successfully protected pregnant women in Quebec from workplace-related hazards and has been a step forward towards greater equality in the workplace. While looking further into this bill, it has come to our attention that the predecessor of the member from Kingston and the Islands also had an interest in such a bill. He had petitioned the government in order to raise awareness on the issue and called on the government to accommodate women working in high-risk environments. Perhaps the current member for Kingston and the Islands would be interested to know that his party actually voted against allowing women to benefit from the programme pour une maternité sans danger at the national level, given the fact that they voted against an NDP bill that proposed creating the exact same Quebec arrangement at the national level. As of now, there is inequity in Quebec between workers, as the women working in workplaces in the federal jurisdiction may not benefit of the program that exists in Quebec, and we're quite troubled by the fact that the Liberals voted against a bill that was put forward by my colleague, specifically my colleague from Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie, at the time, in order to create such an important framework at the national level. I hope that this legislation is a first step towards correcting that mistake. Mr. Speaker, we do support the principle of this bill, particularly the commitment to a national dialogue and national strategy when it comes to ensuring that women can have safe pregnancies no matter the work they do. However, we will be looking to committee and we will certainly be working to propose much-needed changes and key changes at the committee stage. As noted, as encouraged as we are by the sentiment put forward by our colleague from Kingston and the Islands, we are also worried by several items that are in this legislation. It is our understanding that the Member of Parliament views the legislative changes as a first step, and that he understands that more will be required as the government moves forward with the national strategy and consultation. But these legislative changes, unfortunately, will not bring any new benefits for women that will choose to leave the high-risk environments in which they work. The changes to the Employment Insurance Act will allow for some limited flexibility, but it will also force women to choose between eliminating risk in their pregnancy and spending time with their newborn. This is no leap forward for greater equality. The major issue in this bill is that the onus when it comes to risky work is onus that is put on the employer or employee, in this case the pregnant woman, rather than on the employer. This could have an adverse effect, as employers will not have any incentive in finding risk-free tasks for workers who are pregnant. Employers might find it more simple to simply encourage their workers to go on maternity leave earlier, as they might see it more economically viable than finding new tasks for them to do. Such a scenario would actually go against the intention of the bill, in our opinion. In fact, if we look to the program in Quebec, pour une maternité sans danger, it's actually clear that it is an occupational health and safety measure and not a parental leave one. In Quebec, it is the employer's responsibility to provide a safe work environment to their workers, pregnant women included. The Quebec program does not end up costing women at risk any time in terms of their parental leave, and it does not cost them any significant portion of their salary, which is not the case in terms of EI. The program even existed before the parental leave scheme that was implemented in Quebec, and it has always been seen as an occupational health and safety measure, funded through workers' compensation. The distinction here is important because there is a difference between being in an at-risk work environment and being on parental leave. This legislation does not seem to make that difference. The eligibility threshold to qualify for this measure in this bill is also disconcerting. As we all know, being eligible for EI in certain parts of the country can require a significant amount of time on the job market. This is particularly challenging for many women across Canada. This alone will disqualify many women from taking advantage of this measure. Another question mark is that while women on parental leave are benefiting from EI, they are also depriving themselves from significant revenue. Mr. Speaker, we do applaud the goals of the Member of Parliament for Kingston and the Islands with this private member's bill. We recognize that his goal is to enhance the services working women have access to when they are pregnant, and the fact that they deserve to work in a safe environment. We are eager to bring this to committee, this discussion to committee, and to improve the bill with the insight witnesses will bring to the table. But we would have wanted for Quebec women working under federal jurisdiction to have access to the services other workers have. We also hope that the national strategy will bind the government into enhancing the services women are expected to have when they are pregnant, and that it will help to relieve them of their obligation to work in high-risk environments. We will continue to raise our concerns on this matter. We will work with those that have already made their concerns known, and we hope that they will find an attentive ear on the other side. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak to Bill C-243 today, which would create a national strategy for pregnant women working in risky environments. The preamble applauds the positive effects that the program in Quebec has had, but it doesn't allow Quebec women to take part. The member opposite is well-intentioned when he presents this bill, but he might be surprised to hear that his party doesn't have a very good record on this issue. The Liberal Party joined with the Conservative Party in voting down a bill that would have enabled Quebec women working in federally regulated workplaces to benefit from the program pour une maternité sans danger. The National Assembly of Quebec had even unanimously supported the NDP's proposal. The member recognizes that his bill doesn't go as far as he'd like, but he ran for the same party that said no to Quebec women. With this bill, he wants to create two classes of female workers in Quebec, even if ultimately he would like what we had proposed in the previous Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, we believe that barriers that constitute access to employment insurance are also a problem. Many workers in Canada aren't eligible for EI, so they're not eligible for the program either, like they would be under the Quebec program. Another difference between the Quebec program and the measure being proposed by the member opposite is based on the lack of incentive to reassign a worker who is pregnant. The Quebec program is an occupational health and safety one, so it's based on the premise that it is the employer's responsibility to enable workers to work safely. If it's not possible to reassign the worker to a safe position, the worker's income will be made up for under the workers' compensation program. And this regime is funded by employers as opposed to putting them on a work stoppage. They fund the costs linked to the program. What the member for Kingston and the Islands is proposing is to place this burden on the shoulders of workers. So workers working in high-risk environments will fund this inability for workers to provide them with a safe work environment. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, we believe that the member for Kingston and the Islands has identified a problem that we do need to study. The conclusions, however, that he has arrived at are far from ideal. The long-term measures that he wants the government to take are based on the goodwill of the Minister of Employment, and the short-term solutions don't offer anything, or almost nothing, in fact, for women who are working in Canada. We hope that we will be in a position to do more, and we are going to work with those who have already expressed their opposition, and we are eager to work on improving this bill at committee. Thank you.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Labour, Employment and Workforce Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased to stand in this House and speak on behalf of my make a contribution to the debate on my colleague's private member's bill. And as it has been said already in the House, my colleague and new best friend from Louis Saint Laurent. He's indicated that not all private members' bills are created equally or come from the same place. Certainly, I know over the 16 years that I've been here, I've had an opportunity to speak on a number of fairly wide range of private members' bills, and some are somewhat suspect, Mr. Speaker. I know in the last Parliament there was a trend of thought that sort of ran from coast to coast that maybe bills C-525 and 3777 may have had the PMO fingerprints on it. I can neither confirm nor deny that, but I've heard that before. But, Mr. Speaker, I've had an opportunity to stand and speak on a number of occasions on private members' bills that have been presented that have been born from that relationship between a member of Parliament and one of the constituents that he or she represents. And that has been the genesis of that private member's bill. They say that if any leader is to be successful, they have to earn the trust of the people they want to lead. And one thing that we know is that if you want to earn that respect, people have to understand that you care. They want to know how much you care before they care how much you know. And I think by taking an issue as important as the one that is addressed in this private member's bill, when we take an issue like that and invest the time and the energy to develop private members' legislation around it, I think the member from Kingston has to be commended. That happens here, very much so. That happens here on occasion in the House, and I think it's a great thing, and I can certainly, from all parties really, that have brought forward legislation that has come from the grassroots, and so I absolutely, on behalf of my colleagues, I want to commend the member from Kingston for bringing this forward. And specifically on this one, I had the opportunity, I'm watching with great nervousness and I guess the collective knot that we have in our stomach over what's going on in Fort McMurray. I spent 10 years in Fort Mac, and I worked at the GCOS, the Suncor plant on site for a number of years when I first went out there. And if anybody's ever had the opportunity to work in an industrial shop where welding is going on, where you have tradespeople that are using cutting torches or gouging torches or even just running bead, welding bead, you get an appreciation for just that whole environment. And the fact, there are absolutely laws and labor laws around that and about air quality, but you can't help but detect knowing that you're in a place that if you don't take precautions, or if a piece of apparatus isn't up to snuff, then it becomes certainly a workplace of concern. So knowing that. But I do have some comments specifically about the legislation before us today. The health and safety of pregnant workers is an important issue with this government, and through Canada's employment insurance system, we continue to explore ways to support Canadians, including pregnant workers, when they need it most. Under the current EI Act, pregnant women are eligible for a total of 15 weeks of maternity benefits. Maternity benefits are specifically intended to support a woman's income when she's out of the workforce to recover from the physical or emotional effects of a pregnancy or childbirth. Maternity benefits can start as early as 8 weeks before the birth and must end no later than 17 weeks after the birth. Depending on what suits the mother's situation, benefits can be spread out before and after the child is born. Outside of Quebec, which administers its own parental insurance plan, EI maternity benefits are a key policy and income support tool for mothers across Canada. In 2014-15, the EI program paid over $1 billion in maternity benefits to nearly 170,000 claimants in this country. I should also point out that in addition to EI maternity benefits, which are available, only the federal jurisdiction and province of Quebec specifically offer preventative withdrawal job protection for pregnant and/or nursing women. Federally regulated employees under the Canada Labour Code may request a reassignment based on medical advice. Once the request is made, the woman can take a leave with pay until the employer either accommodates her request for a reassignment or confirms that it would not be possible to do so. If a reassignment is not possible, the woman may take a leave of absence for the duration of the risk. The province of Quebec, as had been indicated earlier, offers a similar provision for pregnant and nursing women, providing them with the right to request reassignment to other duties, or, if it is not possible, to take leave if their working conditions may be physically dangerous to their health or that of their unborn child or nursing child. Other provincial and territory jurisdictions in Canada have workplace health and safety standards, but Labour Code job protection for maternity leave varies across the country. The intent of this bill aligns well with our intentions to make EI more flexible and consequently more helpful to all workers who face a period of unemployment for whatever reason, Mr. Speaker. The bill also brings forward several other issues which remain to be examined. Issues such as health and safety and gender equality in the workforce, as well as the notion that a woman's pregnancy could act as a barrier to full participation in the workplace and an impediment to career development. These are some of the issues we intend to discuss in our upcoming consultations with members of this House, of provincial and territorial governments, and other stakeholders, with the primary intention of developing more flexible parental benefits to meet the unique needs of current Canadian families. It's important to note that amending the EI Act is a complex endeavor, and we want to make sure we do it the proper way. Any changes to EI deserve the benefit of further study and consultations with key partners to ensure that the program better responds to the needs of hard-working Canadian families. At this time, this is also a government that wants to act as fast as possible to bring real change to Canadians, and a great deal of that work has already begun. For example, we've introduced the new Canada Child Benefit that will give Canadian families more money to help with the high cost of raising their children. With a maximum benefit of up to $6,400 per child under the age of 6 and up to $5,400 per child to those aged 6 through 17, it will be simpler, more generous, better targeted to those who need the help. The child disability benefit is an additional $2,730. We've made changes to the EI system, Mr. Speaker, going from 2 weeks waiting period to 1. We've made changes to the working while on claim provisions within the EI system. We've enhanced the work sharing agreements that have doubled up to a maximum of 76 weeks that most Canadians recognize as being very much family friendly. Mr. Speaker, these are changes that we believe reflect the needs and demands of today's workforce, and these are changes that Canadians have been asking for. We've also removed barriers to full gender equality in the workforce, making progress in this regard, but it's well recognized that we have to do more. As announced yesterday, we will also amend the Canada Labour Code to allow men and women in the workplace to formally request flexible working arrangements. Mr. Speaker, I know you're signaling that my time is running out. If I could reiterate the fact that I'm very pleased to stand and speak to this bill here today. I want to commend my colleague from Kingston for his work on this piece of legislation, and we look forward to further debating it and again, working as a government to try to enhance the opportunity for all Canadians to play a fuller, more rich and rewarding role in this country's workforce. Thank you very much.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Perth Wellington.
Please rise in the House today to participate in the debate on Bill C-243. I want to begin by thanking the honourable member from Kingston and the Islands for bringing this important issue to the House of Commons for debate. And it's this type of issue, as my colleagues have touched on, that I think are so important that we discuss and we debate in this House of Commons and work together on a collaborative approach to bills such as this. My wife Justine and I have a young daughter. She's about 22 months old, and we're expecting our second child later this month. So we do have some experience with the employment insurance program, particularly as it relates to parental and maternity benefits. My wife is a nurse, and she did have some challenges with the EI program when she first was expecting our first child. And so the changes proposed in this bill, I think, are certainly welcome by a number of people in demanding professions and careers. As members know, the employment insurance program does provide 15 weeks of maternity benefits to qualified people. However, it does not allow this to occur any more than 8 weeks prior to the date of confinement, the date of the baby's proposed birth. For some mothers, there is the opportunity of 15 weeks of sickness benefits, and this does help to bridge the gap in certain situations. However, as the member from Kingston and the Islands does correctly point out, pregnancy is not an illness, and it shouldn't be considered as an illness. And so there is an opportunity here with this bill to explore alternative ways to assist expecting mothers, especially those who work in demanding and challenging careers. I certainly appreciate also that this bill takes into account the different work conditions experienced by women and how it considers that women in these industries may need a degree of flexibility from the programs that government offers. At the same time, this bill, at least the first part of this bill, does not effectively raise the costs of the employment insurance program, and that's something that on this side of the House we can appreciate when we're debating this particular issue. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, many Canadians have jobs where the working conditions can have an impact on their physical health or on the health of the unborn baby. Rules governing the 15 weeks of maternity leave given to women, it's important to point out that working conditions can vary immensely from one person to the next. In addition, this makes it possible to acknowledge that the health and safety of women is of critical importance, and it's important to protect them from harmful things like exposure to dangerous products. Many organizations, like Women Building Futures and the Office to Advance Women Apprentices, support this bill. They feel that its adoption will provide support to women who are working in construction, for example, and who do work in specialized trades. As a member, I have had an opportunity on many occasions to talk to people in the workplace, in specialized trades and employers about the shortage of skilled tradespersons across the country and in my riding. There is a shortage of, there are fewer women in these trades, and that is having an impact. In the long term, this bill may not significantly increase the number of women in specialized trades, but it will not reduce it. After all, in 2012, women held only 11.8% of jobs in construction and 19% of jobs in forestry, fisheries, mining, and the oil and gas sectors. Any measures that can encourage women to hold a non-traditional job are beneficial. In its current form, the current EI program is forcing women who work in physically demanding jobs to make a choice. Either they continue to work in potentially dangerous conditions, or they stop working but do not receive any type of payment during an 8-week period or longer. I believe that all members agree that no one should have to make a choice like that, and that it's not fair to impose that kind of a choice on pregnant women. Mr. Speaker, it's important to clarify that this bill, in its current form, will not increase the number of weeks of maternity leave. It simply gives women an opportunity to choose the time when they officially start to receive maternity benefits.
It is worth noting as well that nothing in this bill prevents a woman from taking additional weeks of unpaid leave if they so choose.
Monsieur le Président, je suis conscient que les prestations de maternité constituent.
Mr. Speaker, I understand maternity benefits are an important aspect of supporting working women, but I must also be clear that, like all benefits, they must be affordable and they must be implemented in a sustainable way. And that's why I encourage the Standing Committee on Human Resources to carefully examine this bill during their clause-by-clause examination to ensure that the costs of the EI maternity benefits program are not materially or substantially increased. Finally, this bill compels the Minister of Employment and Social Development to conduct consultations on the development of a national maternity assistance program. This program is intended to support women who are unable to work during pregnancy due to working conditions and whose employers are unable to accommodate them or to provide reassignment within the organization. Again, I would encourage the Minister to undertake this review with an understanding of the costs and the long-term sustainability of the employment insurance program.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's incredibly important that this House supports all workers, and in this particular case, expectant mothers. I think it's important that women, especially those in demanding careers, those in the skilled trades, have the flexibility to make the employment insurance program work for them. I will be supporting this bill at second reading, and I encourage all members to support this bill at second reading so they can go to committee and continue to hear witnesses and explore this important measure. Again, I want to thank the member from Kingston and the Islands for his hard work on this bill and bringing it forward to this House, and I look forward to supporting it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak in support of Bill C-243, introduced by the member from Kingston and the Islands. This bill is an important first step in addressing the needs of pregnant women who work in potentially hazardous environments. By allowing women working in dangerous jobs to begin using their maternity benefits earlier, and by implementing a national maternity assistance program strategy, this bill provides women with greater flexibility in the decision-making, and it will hopefully lead to implementation of an effective pan-Canadian strategy. First, I would like to acknowledge the member opposite and his predecessor for listening to and being inspired to introduce this bill by their constituent. I know there will be important amendments made at the committee level, and I look forward to seeing them come to fruition. Ms. Ballard, a resident of Kingston, Ontario, was forced to stop working early into her pregnancy because as a welder, her work environment exposed her to potentially dangerous conditions. It's disappointing, but sadly not uncommon, to hear cases of an expectant mom who is forced to take leave from her job without benefits because her workplace is unable or unwilling to accommodate her. Far too often, women lose out on salary or benefits as a result of becoming pregnant, even after dedicating much of their time and hard work to their jobs. In most cases, it makes sense for an employer to accommodate a pregnant woman in this situation because doing so will allow her to work longer, and an employer who is motivated to make accommodations and work together will likely have a positive impact on an employee's productivity. Pregnancy is a special time in a woman's life. It's a time for planning, dreaming, and looking to the future. But it can be a time of worry and concern for the future. How you'll balance paying bills while being on maternity or parental leave, or how you'll take care of yourself and your child during the pregnancy. It's no secret that some activities can indeed pose health and safety risks to pregnant women. As outlined by Health Canada, activities that include standing for prolonged periods of time, lifting heavy loads, being exposed to certain chemicals, and being subject to loud noises or vibrations are just a few that can be named and can negatively influence the health of a pregnant woman. However, it is important to remember that pregnancy does not make women unsuitable for the types of jobs where they will be exposed to these activities. In fact, the opposite is true. There is a real shortage of women in many workplaces, especially in STEM careers, science, technology, engineering, and math-related occupations. And more work needs to be done to ensure these workplaces encourage greater gender diversity and equality. As the OECD explains, when women participate in the workforce, individual industries and the economy as a whole benefit. This is why groups such as Canada's Building Trades Unions and National Council of Women in Canada are supporting this bill. This bill is also supported by many other groups that recognize that pregnancy should never be a barrier for women in the workplace. In my riding of Essex, as in all ridings, this equality is especially important. The Conference Board of Canada, in their Winter 2016 Metropolitan Outlook, highlighted the manufacturing and construction sectors as key sources of growth for Windsor-Essex region. Manufacturing employment is expected to grow by 3.1% annually for the next 2 years. Construction output is also expected to increase by 8.3% as a result of the planned Gordie Howe International Bridge. While there is plenty of opportunity coming to our region in these two sectors, I hope that both men and women will benefit in these sectors. Mr. Speaker, I know well how women feel. As a mother of 2 boys, now 13 and 15, I worked while pregnant in an auto assembly plant in Windsor, where I worked for 20 years. I remember working while pregnant with my first son, and another woman in the workplace was expecting 2. We were working on an assembly line and finding accommodation when you need to rest for a moment after hours of standing or go to the washroom at a moment's notice, not to mention the chemicals that we sometimes had to be around, wasn't always easy to do. We advocated for each other and worked with management to find solutions. After all, we weren't going to be pregnant forever. These solutions worked for us all, and it's important to understand that employers have an obligation to accommodate women when they're pregnant in the workplace. Unfortunately, I wasn't as lucky in my second pregnancy to only need minimal accommodation. I had a riskier pregnancy that was landing me in the hospital weekly, and I was anxious and uncertain about not only the health of my baby and myself, but also about my ability to work. I needed time off and had a hard time finding accommodations that included being able to sit intermittently. After another difficult hospital stay, I attempted to return to work again, only to find that my previous accommodations weren't available to me. I was even more uncertain than ever about what to do. There were many anxious conversations at home and work about my health and ability to work in this environment with chemicals and a physically demanding job. I would go to work every day, uncertain about what job I could do, and would often push myself to try jobs I knew I couldn't perform, trying to be a part of the solution, trying to stay working and balancing my health. It was exhausting and stressful. Thankfully, my coworkers were kind and understanding, and fortunately, I was a member of a union that had negotiated a sick and accident benefit for all of us. My supervisor, union rep, and I met about this issue, and it was offered to me to spend the rest of my pregnancy on this benefit. How lucky I was. I accepted and remember going home and crying with relief as my husband, young son, and I had the ability to focus on my health and not worry about how we would pay the bills or how I would do my job. For my particular situation, this was a resolution. Employers, however, have a fundamental obligation to provide accommodation, and this should always be the first remedy. I spent the remaining months visiting the hospital many times, but ultimately we were very fortunate to welcome our second completely perfect son, Malik. And I began my maternity leave and still had my full year of maternity benefits. All women should have this provision available to them. I can't help but think how unfair it is for other working women who struggle, finding themselves in similar situations without the ability to rest and take care of themselves. No family should have to go through that stress, let alone one that's expecting. For women to be encouraged to enter male-dominated jobs such as STEM, women need to be confident that they won't be left without income in the case their pregnancy is no longer compatible with their work environment or job responsibilities. They need greater flexibility as they make decisions balancing their work and family needs. Quebec understands this well, as evidenced by their Safe Maternity Experience program, which the NDP wants to see expanded to Quebec women in federally regulated workplaces. My colleague from Rosemont, La Petite Patrie, has long been an advocate for this and put forward a private member's bill, which was unfortunately voted down in the previous Parliament. The Safe Maternity Experience program allows women the ability to request a temporary reassignment should their regular duties become a health risk due to a pregnancy. If reassignment is not possible, the women are able to preventatively withdraw from work and receive 90% of the income they would have received. The Quebec program is an exceptional aid for women. By removing the threat of losing income due to pregnancy, it helps break down barriers that women face when trying to become fully active members of the workforce. This program is more in line with how Canada should be addressing this issue. These maternity supports should be offered through a workplace health and safety program, not through a parental leave program that compensates women through employment insurance benefits. Bill C-243 does little to address the gap between Canada's national program and what global leaders like France and Germany are doing. While extending the beginning eligibility date from which a woman working in a dangerous environment can begin maternity leave, the bill leaves the total amount of maternity leave unchanged. Both the percentage of income received and the total weeks that can be collected remain the same. This simply changes the choices available to women about when to begin their leave. If a pregnant woman begins her leave early, it means she will have to go back to work early, and that could lead to costs and challenges of finding childcare, especially for young infants, where space is extremely limited. In conclusion, I would like to restate my support for Bill T-243 with the amendments that will be welcomed at the committee level. And I encourage my colleagues on all sides of the House to support the immediate development and implementation of a national maternity assistance program that will better support women who are unable to work during their pregnancy.
Alors, la période prévue.
The time provided for the consideration of private members' business has now expired.